But I'd like to start with the moments that led you to where you are today, having to do with your own daughter's birth and your own daughter's, well, I'll let you tell the story.
Thank you. So, similarly to you and what you shared about your daughter, my daughter wanted to expand her family, and she decided in 2018 that her and her partner, Omari, who's also in the film, would start planning and working on bringing a second child into the world. And at the time, her first child, my granddaughter, Anari, was 2 years old. So I think they declared that they were going to start planning in November. They went on a trip, and when she came back, she was pregnant. So it happened immediately. That was a good trip. So she went through her pregnancy. She had a midwife, she had a doula. My daughter was very fit and healthy. She worked out while she was pregnant. She was a dancer before that. And so, just a really healthy body. She ate really well, and went to her regular prenatal visits with the midwife, and wanted to make sure that she didn't experience what she had experienced in the first pregnancy, which was a C-section. She just wasn't happy with that outcome. So she wanted to have a vaginal birth after C-section, what they call a VBAC in the field of reproductive health. And so working towards that, she went into labor. I was called to come to her house. I was at her house earlier and was called to come back. She was progressing and her water broke, and then the laboring part kind of ceased. So her plan to have a home birth was thwarted. And so we ended up going to the hospital in Brooklyn. And I won't name the hospital here, but I had a connection at the hospital because I've been in this work for 15 years. So before my daughter died, which made it so devastating when she did pass, I was already in this work doing annual conferences, operating as an activist and advocate for others, and really speaking from my lived experience because I experienced birth trauma with all three of my children in different ways. And so went into the hospital. She wasn't progressing there. They waited to see if she would have a vaginal birth at the hospital and were giving her support to do that. And then decided after a day and a half that they would offer up another C-section, and she consented. And it was a powerful consenting. It wasn't anything that she felt bad about because she knew that they had tried and so had she. And then she had a C-section, and we had our beautiful Khari, who's my second grandchild, a son, and born 8 pounds flat. And we were all just really elated. But she had a C-section, so she had to stay in the hospital longer. When she was discharged, got the traditional discharge papers and went back home. And then a couple of days later, she started to feel symptoms, hard to breathe, pain in her chest, not being able to go up the stairs after coming down the stairs. And we were talking about it as a family. And I asked her, because I'm in the field, doing this work, as an activist and advocate, if it might be a pulmonary embolism, but she said that they checked her for that and everything else. So when she went back she called the hospital, she went back for her follow-up to get her stitches removed. She went for them to check on the baby. And each time she spoke about the symptoms she was having, and they were like, oh, you had a C-section. This is normal. And she and I spoke. So I reached out to the head of labor and delivery at the hospital and spoke to them on the phone about the symptoms. And the person said that she needed to probably rest and just have the family take care of her. And so we planned around that, but that was the worst that we could have done because she had clots in her legs that when you are stationary, they move and they grow and expand. And so the clots moved from her legs to her lungs, and then they stopped her heart. The beautiful part about it, and then I'll open up the space or leave for questions if you have additional questions, is that I was there. It's bittersweet, but I was there for her last laugh. I was there for the last meal she ate. I was there to hear her last words before she went into cardiac arrest at her home. What was tragic and horrible about it is when the ambulance came, which it came right away, they immediately started to question in ways that are associated with what happens to folks when they're birthing while Black, when they're driving while Black, when they're just spending time in community while Black, is they started to question whether she was on drugs. And they asked us as a family multiple times if she was using drugs, and was that the reason why she was going into this crisis medically. And we explained all the pieces. And I even shared that I believed it was a pulmonary embolism, Yet they ignored that. And then they also kept questioning every round of folks that came, the fire department, the police. It was just really crazy that they were doing that. And even though I was in distress and I was scared for my daughter, I was filing that in my mind to go back to later, because that's just how I operate as an activist. It's like, why are they doing this? But I also needed to pay attention to what was happening to my child. So she was rushed to the hospital after they stabilized her, and then she died within 15 hours after the initial crisis, and it was a pulmonary embolism.
Mm.